Word extreme. Description describes something far beyond the usual or expected. It indicates a high degree or intensity of something, whether it's a feeling, situation, or quality. It's used to show something is not moderate or average. Phrases of example. First, the weather was extreme, a fierce wind howling through the trees. Second, it was an extreme act of courage to face such danger. Third, his passion for music was an extreme devotion. Word harmful. Description means causing or likely to cause damage or injury. It describes something that is detrimental to health, well-being, or a system. It suggests a negative effect or potential for harm. Phrases of example. First, a harmful dose of doubt can ruin a life. Second, his words were harmful, though he meant them to be helpful. Third, the environment is increasingly threatened by harmful pollutants. Word book. Description, a physical object with pages, usually containing text and images. It can also refer to a written work of fiction or nonfiction. It's something you can read and often has a cover. Phrases of example. First, a good book is the best of friends. Second, the book was a comfort in his hand. Third, there is no friend as loyal as a book. Word wash. Description refers to the act of cleaning something with water and soap. It can also describe the water itself used for cleaning. It's a common word used to describe a basic and essential action. Phrases of example. First, I need a good wash after all that work. Second, the rain gave the city a necessary wash. Third, the tide came in and began to wash the beach clean. Word without. Description indicates the absence of something. It describes a lack or omission, showing that something is not present or included. It's used to show something is missing or not happening. Phrases of example. First, I will not go without you. Second, he walked without looking back. Third, she could not live without him. Word assemble. Description means to gather or put things or people together in a specific place for a purpose. It often describes a process of construction or organization, like putting together a product or forming a group. It implies a structured and intentional action. Phrases of example. First, she would assemble the pieces of her broken life and make a new one, a better one. Second, the whole army would assemble in the morning, and they would march to their doom. Third, the world had to assemble itself again after the terrible war, and it was a very difficult thing to do. Word evidence. Description refers to facts or information that proves something is true. It can be anything that supports a claim or shows that something happened. It's used to show proof or support an argument, often presented in a clear and factual way. Phrases of example. First, there was evidence of a struggle in the room. Second, the evidence points to a conspiracy. Third, he presented irrefutable evidence of his innocence. Word yard. Description, a yard is an outdoor area, typically next to a house or building. It can refer to a grassy area, a paved space, or a fenced-in area. It often suggests a place for recreation or gardening and is a common feature of residential properties. Phrases of example. First, the yard was overgrown, a testament to years of neglect. Second, she wandered through the garden, a maze of overgrown herbs and a neglected yard. Third, he kicked a ball across the yard, a moment of carefree abandon. Word live. Description describes something as being currently in use or operation. It often refers to a wire, connection, or system that is functional and actively transmitting or receiving signals. It indicates that something is presently working. Phrases of example. First, a live wire hummed with a dangerous energy. Second, the live embers glowed softly in the hearth. Third, he felt the live current of possibility within him. Word skill. Description, a learned ability to do something well. It's a capacity to perform a task or activity effectively, often through practice and training. It can be physical or mental and involves competence in a specific area. Phrases of example. First, it is not enough to be strong, you must also have skill. Second, a good cook is a master of skill and patience. Third, he lacked the skill to articulate his feelings. Word, withdrawal. Description denotes the action of removing or retracting something, either physically or figuratively. It can refer to taking money from an account, retreating from a place, or retracting a statement. It implies a reversal or cessation of an action. Phrases of example. First, his sudden withdrawal from public life surprised everyone. Second, the withdrawal of support was a devastating blow to their efforts. Third, a policy of withdrawal from the conflict seemed inevitable. Word play. Description refers to a theatrical performance, like a movie or a stage show. It can also mean a game or a children's activity. It describes something entertaining or amusing, often involving acting or recreation. Phrases of example. First, it is a time for play, a time for rest, a time for mourning. Second, let us go back to our play and laugh as we did before. Third, the children began to play, their laughter echoing through the garden. Word, analyze. Description means to examine something carefully to understand it better. It involves breaking down a subject into smaller parts to identify its components, purpose, or meaning. It is used when investigating or evaluating something in detail. Phrases of example. First, it is my business to analyze the problem, not to solve it. Second, he would analyze every word she said, searching for a hidden meaning. Third, we must analyze the situation before we can make a plan. Word towel. Description, a piece of absorbent cloth used for drying yourself or surfaces. It's commonly found in bathrooms and gyms. It's a basic item for personal hygiene and cleaning. Phrases of example. First, she wrapped herself in a towel, shivering slightly. Second, he dried his face with a towel, a weary sigh escaping his lips. Third, she laid out a fluffy towel on the beach, ready for a swim. Word, confusing. Description describes something that is difficult to understand or make sense of. It suggests a lack of clarity, causing bewilderment or making it hard to grasp the information presented. It can refer to situations, instructions, or concepts. Phrases of example. First, his life was a confusing maze of choices and consequences. Second, the plot twists were confusing and hard to follow. Third, it was a confusing situation, and no one knew what to do. Word, deliberate. Description describes something done consciously and intentionally, not by accident. It suggests a careful plan or purpose behind an action. It conveys a sense of forethought and intention rather than impulsiveness or randomness. Phrases of example. First, a deliberate act of defiance is the most important thing. Second, he took a deliberate breath, attempting to compose himself. Third, the deliberate silence of the room was almost palpable. Word, meeting. Description, a gathering of people for a specific purpose, like to talk or discuss something. It's a chance to come together, often planned in advance, to share information or make decisions. Phrases of example. First, the meeting was short, and the news was not good. Second, the first meeting was quite awkward, and the second even more so. Third, a meeting of minds is a powerful thing, a force for change. Word, profit. Description refers to a financial gain, especially from a business. It's the amount of money left over after subtracting costs and expenses. It indicates a positive financial outcome or benefit. Phrases of example. First, the profit of a man is his friend. Second, he sought not profit, but a deeper understanding. Third, their only hope was to seize any profit they could. Word, further. Description means additional or more. It describes something that goes beyond what has already been said or done. It's used to indicate something extra or supplementary to what was previously mentioned. Phrases of example. First, they stood further from the window, seeking refuge. Second, he looked further down the empty road, hoping for a sign. Third, but she wished for further knowledge and understanding. Word, doctor. Description, a person who is trained to treat people who are sick or have injuries. They provide medical care and advice to help people feel better and stay healthy. It's a common profession focused on well-being. Phrases of example. First, the doctor said I needed to rest and get some fresh air. Second, he consulted the doctor about his strange illness. Third, a doctor is worse than a bad king. Word 2. Description marks the beginning of an infinitive verb form, like to eat or to go. It connects to with a verb, indicating the action or purpose. It's a fundamental part of many English phrases and sentence structures. Phrases of example. First, I went to the store to buy milk. Second, it is good to help others when they are in need. Third, I wanted to know everything about her. Word, applaud. Description means to show approval or praise, typically by clapping hands. It suggests enthusiastic agreement or admiration for a performance, achievement, or idea. It implies a public and demonstrative show of support. Phrases of example. First, she would applaud his every word, as if he were a god and she a mere mortal. Second, the crowd began to applaud, and he bowed deeply, a small smile on his face. Third, we must applaud the courage of those who would stand against the darkness and fight for what is right. Word, airport. Description, a place where airplanes take off and land. It's where people travel to catch flights and where they arrive after flying. It includes terminals, runways, and areas for baggage. Phrases of example. First, she felt as though she had been living in an airport, a place of constant departures and no arrivals. Second, the whole world is an airport, and we are all just waiting for our flight to be called. Third, an airport is a strange kind of place, a place of goodbyes and a place of new beginnings. Word, necessarily. Description means something must happen or be true, it's essential or required. It indicates a logical consequence or a condition that cannot be avoided. It's often used to express a conclusion or a restriction. Phrases of example. First, one is not necessarily obliged to be agreeable. Second, it is not necessarily a bad thing to be sad. Third, the past is not necessarily the future. Word, amend. Description means to make minor changes to a text, law, or plan to improve or correct it. It suggests refining something that already exists, often to fix errors or make it more effective. It implies a careful and deliberate process of alteration. Phrases of example. First, we cannot amend a man's nature, but we can amend his habits. Second, it is never too late to amend, and to make up for all that has been amiss. Third, the law, in its majestic equality, forbids the rich and the poor alike to amend their ways. Word, series. Description, a group of related things or events, considered as a whole. It can refer to a sequence of actions, a set of books, or a chain of similar occurrences. It implies an order or connection between the items. Phrases of example. First, a series of events led to his downfall. Second, the entire series of events was orchestrated. Third, it was a series of small choices that defined us. Word, vicious. Description describes someone or something that is deliberately cruel or violent. It suggests a malicious intent and a lack of compassion. Often used to characterize behavior, actions, or animals, it conveys a strong sense of negativity and harm. Phrases of example. First, his laughter was vicious, a sound of pure, unadulterated malice. Second, the storm unleashed a vicious, unrelenting assault on the coast. Third, he possessed a vicious intellect, capable of dismantling any argument. Word, with. Description indicates togetherness, possession, or a relationship. It shows that something or someone is connected to something else, accompanies something, or is experiencing something alongside something else. It's a very common and versatile word. Phrases of example. First, he walked with a confidence that belied his fear. Second, she smiled with a kindness that touched his soul. Third, I'll stay with you always. Word, border. Description refers to the boundary or edge of a place or country. It signifies the line that separates two areas, whether physical or abstract. It can describe a geographic limit or a boundary in a more general sense. Phrases of example. First, I am not a man of the law, but a man of the border, where the law does not apply. Second, the border was a line drawn on a map, but in their hearts, it was a chasm. Third, she was a woman on the border of sanity, a delicate line she was always afraid of crossing. Word, rock. Description, a solid, natural object made of stone, often found on the ground or in water. It can also refer to a large piece of stone used for building. It's a common and basic word for a fundamental part of the landscape. Phrases of example. First, the rocks were heavy and the sea was wild. Second, she felt as steady as a rock, despite the storm. Third, he clung to the rock face, defying the wind. Word, starve. Description, means to suffer or cause someone to suffer from extreme hunger. It can also be used figuratively to describe a strong desire or need that is not being satisfied. It implies a lack of something essential, whether it's food or something else. Phrases of example. First, they would starve the people to make them docile. Second, he would rather starve than give in to their demands. Third, we must not starve the nation's spirit with fear. Word, sphere. Description refers to a field of activity or influence. It can also denote a round, three-dimensional object. Figuratively, it describes an area of concern, expertise, or responsibility. It implies a defined scope or boundary. Phrases of example. First, the sphere of her influence extended to every corner of the village. Second, our sphere of action is limited by our resources. Third, his intellectual sphere encompassed a vast array of subjects. Word, sexual. Description, relates to or arouses sexual feelings or desires. It can describe behaviors, feelings, or content that involves physical intimacy or attraction. Use it carefully, as it carries sensitive connotations and requires respectful context. Phrases of example. First, she felt a sudden, inexplicable sexual tension with him. Second, there was a strange, almost sexual curiosity in his eyes. Third, it was a raw, visceral, sexual energy that filled the room. Word, black. Description describes a color, the absence of color. It refers to something dark, like night or coal. It's a basic descriptor used to identify objects or things that lack lightness or brightness. Phrases of example. First, a black dog sat on the step, its eyes shining like embers in the dark. Second, he had a black heart, a heart as black as the night and as cold as the sea. Third, the night was as black as pitch, and the stars were like pinpricks in the darkness. Word, bottom. Description means the lowest part or surface of something. It can refer to the base of an object or the lowest level of a ranking. It's used to indicate the very end or the lowest point of something. Phrases of example. First, she had a feeling in her stomach, a hollow feeling, as if she were at the bottom of the world. Second, he was at the bottom of the ocean, but he was not afraid, for he knew he was not alone. Third, the bottom line is, you're either a winner or a loser, and I'm not a loser. Word, happily. Description describes doing something with pleasure and joy. It indicates a positive emotion and a sense of contentment. It's often used to portray a cheerful and positive manner. Phrases of example. First, she lived happily ever after, a classic fairy tale ending. Second, they danced happily under the moonlight, celebrating their love. Third, the children laughed happily, chasing butterflies in the meadow. Word, uphold. Description, means to maintain, defend, or support something, like a principle, law, or tradition. It suggests upholding values or ensuring something continues as it should, often in the face of challenge or opposition. Phrases of example. First, we must uphold the laws, even if we disagree with them. Second, it is our duty to uphold the values we believe in, no matter the cost. Third, to uphold justice is to be a beacon of hope in a world of darkness. Word, mail. Description refers to letters or packages sent through a postal service. It also describes the system used for sending these items. It can also refer to electronic messages, like email. Phrases of example. First, I received a letter by mail, addressed in her familiar hand. Second, he checked the mail every morning, hoping for news from home. Third, the parcel arrived by mail, containing a collection of rare books. Word, fabric. Description refers to material woven or knitted into cloth. It describes the material used to make clothing, upholstery, or other textiles. It can refer to the type of material, cotton, silk, or the material itself. Phrases of example. First, the fabric of his life was woven with hardship and resilience. Second, she draped herself in the finest fabric, a queen amongst commoners. Third, the world's fabric was starting to unravel, thread by thread. Word, fatal. Description means causing death, resulting in death. It describes something that leads to a deadly outcome, often in reference to accidents, illnesses, or events. It carries a serious and irreversible connotation. Phrases of example. First, the fatal error was to believe that he could conquer nature. Second, a fatal flaw in his character led to his downfall. Third, the fatal consequence of his decision echoed through the years. Word, within. Description indicates location or time limits. It means inside something or a specified area. It can also refer to a period of time. Something must happen or be completed inside that time frame. It expresses inclusion or containment. Phrases of example. First, the truth within is always the deepest. Second, there is a within of every without. Third, the silence within him was a heavy thing. Word, dictator. Description, a person who holds absolute power, typically obtained through force and maintained through oppression. Dictators often rule without democratic processes, suppressing dissent and controlling all aspects of society. Phrases of example. First, his power was that of a dictator, absolute and unyielding. Second, the dictator spoke of unity, while his armies planned invasion. Third, a dictator is merely the shadow of an idea. Word, unpleasant. Description describes something causing discomfort or dislike. It suggests a negative experience, either physically or emotionally. It's used to characterize something disagreeable, irritating, or not enjoyable, often evoking a sense of negativity. Phrases of example. First, it was an unpleasant surprise to find her so changed. Second, the room held an unpleasant odor of decay and dust. Third, the memory was unpleasant, like a sharp stone in my shoe. Word, unemployed. Description describes someone who is not currently employed and is actively seeking work. It indicates a state of being without a job, often due to job loss or a search for new opportunities. It is used to describe a person's employment status. Phrases of example. First, he was unemployed, but he had a resilience and a hope that surprised her. Second, many were unemployed and hungry, their dreams shattered by the war. Third, the unemployed miner watched the rain fall, his future uncertain. Word, density. Description refers to the compactness of a substance. It describes how much matter is contained within a given volume or space. It's often used in scientific contexts relating to materials or populations, indicating concentration or crowding. Phrases of example. First, the density of the forest pressed in around him, a palpable weight. Second, the intellectual density of the city was intoxicating, a vibrant pulse. Third, the population density of the slums was staggering, a sea of faces. Word crash. Description refers to a sudden violent impact between two or more things, often resulting in damage or destruction. It can describe accidents involving vehicles, systems failures, or a sudden collapse. It implies an unexpected and forceful event. Phrases of example. First, the impact of the crash echoed through the silent forest. Second, a sudden crash of thunder shook the old house. Third, the stock market crash brought immense financial ruin. Word scare. Description, a feeling of fear or anxiety, something that causes this feeling. It can refer to a frightening experience or object. It's often used to describe a sudden shock or a disturbing situation that evokes a sense of alarm. Phrases of example. First, the scarecrow was the only friend he had. Second, that scare was enough to make her question everything. Third, the scare of losing everything haunted his dreams. Word fraction. Description refers to a part of a whole. It represents a small portion or amount, often expressed as a ratio of two numbers. It's used when describing quantities that are less than one or a single unit, like a piece of something. Phrases of example. First, a fraction of the joy she felt was wasted on his silence. Second, it's a small fraction of what I need, but it's something. Third, the success of the plan depended on a tiny fraction of luck. Word barrier. Description, a thing that prevents movement or progress. It can be physical, like a wall, or non-physical, such as a social or legal obstacle. It signifies something that blocks or restricts access or communication. Phrases of example. First, I had a sudden awareness of the great barrier between us. Second, the only barrier to success is the fear of failure. Third, fear is a barrier that we must break. Word casual. Description describes something relaxed, informal, and unpretentious. It can refer to clothing, relationships, or events, suggesting a lack of formality or seriousness. Often used to convey a comfortable and easygoing atmosphere or style. Phrases of example. First, he met her in a casual encounter, all smiles and shared glances. Second, the conversation was casual, but I sensed a deeper meaning beneath the surface. Third, she had a casual elegance that drew people to her without her trying.